Welcome back to the show this week, to the Spark Joy podcast. And this is interesting because I'm actually going to be re-recording today my first episode, even though I think I'm up to 6 Spark Joy episodes. However, I've just been trying to, so I can launch it, launch this podcast. I've been reviewing my, editing for my very first episode and realized that I have 1 hour worth of content, but I'm missing the video for it. So I've got the audio, but I'm missing over an hour's worth of content. And so it's the resistance to even, progress this project that I'm working on, which is Spark Joy podcast, and, actually hitting green light and getting off the starting block. And so today's episode, I really wanted to take you on a little story tour with me of the subject of resistance and persistence and tenacity. And so these are some of the things that if you want to actually create a life and business that is bigger than where you are at the moment, you want to enlarge your world, enlarge your worldview, enlarge your bank account. You want to just be enlarged. You want to enlarge the space of your territory, whether that's spiritually, physically, financially, even, intellectually, then you will come up against resistance. And so we're going to be talking about this today. Welcome to the show. So back in about 2019, it would be before COVID, I actually was in a relationship with somebody who was really creative, and we were at the beginning stage of encouraging and sharpening each other and actually launching out in some of our creative dreams. So they were in creative, I was a creative, and some of the stuff had been dormant. And so it's been a lot of hours talking about our creativity and some of the hopes and dreams, the business ideas, some of the prophetic words we received in relation to this creativity in business. And the thing that kept coming up is our resistance. And it got to the point where it was clear that the thing that actually was in the way of us actually stepping into these creative endeavors, that, this dream of business, a bigger creative entrepreneurial vehicle to carry some of these dreams forward, was that there was resistance in the way. And so it almost was comical that we're just like, why is it so hard? What is this invisible barrier, this invisible resistance to actually, take action and create, something tangible with what was kind of like in our head and our heart. And so, it's taken a long time to get to the point of actually being able to bring forth some of this creativity in business and come up with, the reason that I am such a good coach and to be able to mentor and guide others is that I will be able to see very, very quickly what is actually standing, in your way of being able to bring this forward. And quite often the thing that's actually standing in the way is you or me. It's our own resistance to be able to persist. And, and I don't know where you are on if there was a scale or a road. Maybe your resistance is that you haven't even allowed yourself to dream what, how your life could be different, or your finances, or, a business or something like that. So maybe that's your resistance. You're still at, you're still there, and you haven't even been able to, clip away part of, it's like meat when it has all that connective tissue when you cook. I don't know if you've ever slow cooked meat, but, it can have that real tough white, like, especially if you cook some like lamb or something like that and then you cut it away. Resistance, I feel like, is like that sinew, and it actually needs to be tenderized and either cut, so that then the meat can, be cooked and you can kind of access it. And so quite often, the goodness, I don't know if I'm doing a very good job of actually, giving some kind of metaphors for this, but the job is, individually, and also if, you're working with a mentor or a guide on this, is to identify where those pockets of resistance are, because when you have a pocket of resistance to something that you're incredibly passionate about, maybe you already identified it's something that you should be working on for doing, so you've identified that you like it and, that it's something that you're called to. And then the other thing is, have you begun? So, we've got the first people who haven't even began dreaming, and then there's the people who have dreamt, they've got the vision, maybe it's, like within their sights, but then there's still resistance for them to actually kind of turn the light and access it and step through and bring something tangible forward, which would align with some of those dreams, goals, and vision. A lot of it is actually vision, because it's your imagination. We have, through our imagination, God's given us our imagination. It's incredibly powerful, and we can imagine, the worst, or we can imagine, the future in a positive kind of way, in an imaginative, creative, spiritual way of what could be possible. And that's something that I am incredibly strong and gifted. It comes really naturally to me to be able to see the possibilities for others, the possibilities, in cities and environments and things that could be, expanded and opened up. But first, you really, unfortunately, resistance is really like it's fear. And so there's this saying that says, with fear that we could imagine it's fear is like a person, or, if you're a Christian or a believer, you might even think, fear could even be like demonic or something like that. I've certainly felt, that oppression of fear of something actually, spiritually there that could be shifted and moved. So, that's definitely in my arsenal, to pray and shift things in the spirit in terms of resistance. But then there's also resistance can be mental, and you've got a lot of autonomy and control over that. It's, the thinking and your thoughts patterns, which actually are, quite often it can be easy. It can be like cast a demon out of me or something like that if it's demonic or spiritual, to cut away some of this resistance. But if the resistance is actually a thought pattern or a belief or something ingrained in you, then that there's actually, it takes more diligence, because you have to first become aware that you have resistance there, and then identify the thought patterns and the things that might be keeping you small and not able to actually step forward and create something in line with your vision. One of my favorite writers who actually speaks about resistance is Steven Pressfield. And so he is an incredible creative and entrepreneur writer from Los Angeles. And I might just read this to you, but he says resistance is a force that prevents us from doing work that is important for our growth and evolution. It often manifests as fear, procrastination, or self-sabotage. Helped articulate it for me as to what that resistance that I felt and my other creative friend felt back in 2019 when we started coming face to face with some of our vision and thinking, gosh, I'm ready to take hold of this and I'll do whatever it takes to move out of being, a bit out of my comfort zone. And I'm going to go and scale the wall of my vision and dreams and creativity. And especially in relation to entrepreneurship, to bring forward that creativity in a vehicle of business. And when I speak of a vehicle, I see that as, when you've got vision and dreams and goals and stuff like that. Like it needs to sit within something which will carry it forward. Steven Pressfield is an author from Los Angeles who has written movies, well-known movies, self-help books. He's even written books about resistance. So resistance is a force, this is what he says, that prevents us from doing our work in the world. And then Pressfield, there's these awesome quotes. He says, the more important a call or action is to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel towards pursuing it. Resistance, by definition, is self-sabotage. And resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. And then Steven Pressfield actually emphasizes what you're doing is important and the goal is to recognize and then take action in spite of it. So resistance, and this is quoting Steven Pressfield, is experienced as fear. The degree of fear equates to the strength of resistance. Therefore, the more fear we feel about a specific enterprise, the more certain we can be that that enterprise is important to us and to the growth of our soul. And that's why we feel so much resistance. So this is what I want to say to you. The resistance is a sign. It's a sign that you need to move in that direction. And even though it's difficult, to face that head on, and that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years, is to actually take a hold of some of those dreams and visions and to bring them forth into action and into, tangible, experiences and results, so you can actually see that come forward in your life and overcome that resistance. I mean, there are so many great quotes in relation to this whole idea of resistance. Back in, a few years ago, I was traveling and I went through Australia and I was up in Queensland, and God actually led me to kind of this apostolic hub that was in Queensland, and it was for sale, and I'd seen it on a real estate site. Anyway, I ended up visiting the owners at this property to kind of look at the sale of the property because I was kind of curious about it. And when I was there, I ended up getting prayer from them. So it's sort of a prayer house. And when they prayed for me, they actually ended up praying for kind of fear and, in terms of me kind of moving forward. And so I think that's something that I've had to actually overcome a lot, which is moving through fear and just not letting, the voice of fear, the voice of that resistance be louder than the pull for me to keep taking action and moving forward into some of these things that I feel that God has been instructing me to do. In terms of building a business and, stepping forward as a mentor, as a coach for others to bring them into, their destiny, into their purpose, and release my voice, and that my voice would actually be something that would call others forward to, speak up and, move way past that resistance and create something brand new that the world's never seen before. So I'm going to just read a few more of these quotes because they're actually quite funny. And as I read them, you may just think, gosh, that's me. So, Steven Pressfield, it's called The War of Art, actually, his book, if you do want to look it up. So if you find yourself asking yourself and your friends, don't do that. That's but a mistake, by the way, asking your friends, like, what should I do? Am I this? Am I that? I think, it's great to be able to get to that level, or that place of your own personal autonomy and authority, and being able to consult yourself, people that go around and ask their friends all the time what they should do and stuff like that. I just think, it's fine to bring in advisors and people like that. But firstly, as part of your own personal leadership, you need to be able to consult yourself and have confidence in what you hear, in your intuition, and, if you've got a relationship with God, hearing his voice. So if you find yourself asking yourself and your friends, am I really a writer? Am I really an artist? Am I really a business person? Chances are you are. The counterfeit innovator is wildly self-confident, and the real one is scared to death. And so, I think there would be so many more innovations, interesting businesses that would come forward and believers, creating new things if we could actually unhook ourselves from being scared to death, and that ties in this resistance. I mean, it can even be some of the things that you can feel that resistance around can be the fear of man. It can be, and when I talk about the fear of man, it can actually be like the closest people to you. There can be a lot of resistance when people's voices or words of accusation or judgment, or people judging you if you step out from who you've always been or what you've always done. And so you'll definitely come up against this if you are committed to actually building a way bigger life and a bigger community. If you want to go beyond what you already know wherever you are, you'll come up against resistance and just be like, oh, this is what Bonnie was talking about. This is okay. This is actually a sign. This is great. I'm having this resistance right now because it means that I'm growing. It means that, I've arisen. I've stood up on my feet and I'm starting to, stir the waters to actually not be stagnant, but begin, to try something new. So some of the other things that Steven Pressfield says, our job in this life is not to shape ourselves into some ideal we imagine we ought to be, but to find out who we already are and become it. And that really reminds me of The Velveteen Rabbit, which is one of my favorite stories. And I've even got a program actually called The Velveteen Spark. And it's all about becoming real. And so, to actually step into your true purpose and your authenticity of, who God's created you to be and really connect in with that beyond, a job title, a company, brand, an employment contract, and coming back to your true identity, it really is, when we what does he say? But to find out who we already are and become it. Our job in life is not to shape ourselves into some ideal we imagine we ought to be. And so, that takes a lot of overcoming resistance or riding in the car with resistance to, let some of the other things fall away so that you can, be authentic and be you. So to do really important work in the world that makes a difference for a large amount of people, if you speak to any leader who's gone and, created something significant, they would have come up against resistance. So this is fantastic. I love this quote because this is definitely something I've come up against. The artist committing himself to his calling has volunteered for hell. Whether he knows it or not, he will be dining for the duration on a diet of isolation, rejection, self-doubt, despair, ridicule, contempt, and humiliation. You're like, where do I sign up, God? That sounds awesome. I want to do that. I want to do my calling. And, this is from the Steven Pressfield, from The War of Art. But, that's definitely all of those things. You can't be resistant to it. Like, if you're going to go and do your calling, you're going to live your calling, embody it, embrace it, no matter what the cost, no matter what happens. And you're like, I'm going after my calling, whatever the financial costs, whatever the emotional costs, even, the rejection, the self-doubt, the despair, the ridicule, contempt, humiliation. I mean, these are, if you study anybody who's gone and done significant things, I even just think of like great revivalists who, definitely received all of those accolades while they were alive, but then, when people pass away or whatever, then they sometimes, much later, some of their work can become praised. But when they're alive, like I'm thinking of like Smith Wigglesworth, or people who were controversial at the time, because they were pioneering, they were breaking through resistance, and they were moving through some of that, the diet of isolation and being misunderstood by, by man and by people, but they had their calling, which was calling them forward to pioneer and do something brand new. And so I'm calling, the pioneers, I'm calling the people who have a calling and they can feel that resistance. And I know that the resistance has been so great, even for me to be able to step forward into what God's, the blueprints and the things that He showed me, that I've come to terms, with my friend resistance here. I mean, I won't allow resistance to kind of take authority or, dominate my emotions or my mind or, the actions that I take, but that I would be aware and be like, haha, I see you, resistance. Trying to self-sabotage and, just bring these thoughts of doubt and despair and, humiliation, contempt, all these kind of like real negative emotions, really, to be able to break through to create something new. Yeah, I want to be in that camp. I want to be one of these people, one of these leaders who is actually comfortable to ride, in the chariot with resistance, who can come along, but it will not be directing the way that my horse is going. And, because I have the angels of the heaven's armies with me. I have a greater vision and my calling is, it's beyond me. It's not it's not self-led. It's something that God has placed in my heart. He's like, Bonnie, let's go this way. And Bonnie, I want you to go and collect up the other leaders who are also struggling with resistance, and I want you to lead them forward and bring them into this new day where they'll be able to, break away from some of those, like shine the light on resistance. Say, I see you and you won't stop me. I'm also shining the light on the others who are being resisted and struggling with resistance, that you would be able to step forward and let's go and create the blueprints. Let's bring forth the innovations. Let's bring forth the dreams and the profitable baskets of business that God's placed in your heart to create. And that's why I'm speaking about resistance today. So there's just so many good quotes that, I can't physically have Steven Pressfield here in studio with me today, but I do have his quotes, and I really just, as I speak forth, what he's written, it's just so powerful. So he says, are you a born writer? Were you put on earth to be a painter, a scientist, or an apostle of peace? And I definitely want to be an apostle of peace. In the end, the question can only be answered by action. Do it or don't do it. And actually, that reminds me, I think I talked about it, but there's an incredible internet network marketer who is called Frank Kern. You can look him up, but 25 years ago, he was one of the first pioneers in internet and influence marketing. And there's this incredible video. Honestly, if anyone can find it on YouTube, I saw it once and I've never been able to find it again. But he's doing a keynote speech and just speaking about this idea of resistance, do it or don't do it. Frank Kern, he's American and he was from like down south, the southern states of America. And then he ended up moving to San Diego, made, I don't know, $100 million in network marketing and influence marketing through email list marketing. I mean, he's like the grandfather pioneer of the whole industry. But he says, people are like, I haven't got my website built or whatever. And he pretends he's like got a gun and he's like, I've got your family hostage. Get that website built by like in 24 hours or everyone dies. I mean, he's very dramatic. I'm not saying this. But it's basically that whole idea of like, do it or don't do it. And, and like the delay, the resistance loves to kind of come and create the comfort of like delay or, not having that you don't have enough in your hand right now. You don't have the right things to kind of progress. And so resistance really is an absolute liar. It will lie to you all day long. It actually makes me think about, I've had like quite a lot of words where people have said that, Bonnie, you've got like a mustard seed in your hand. And would I use the mustard seed that God would multiply what I have? And you're like, but God, I've only got a little mustard seed. Like my faith is so small. What could I do with this? And in the word, God says that in the Gospels that Jesus says, that you can move mountains. That if you speak to this mountain, you say, hey, you mountain, you be cast off into the sea, and just actually, just with that you have a lot of autonomy and you have a lot of authority if you choose to use it. Anyway, so getting back to that story of Frank Kern, I just love his whole do it or don't do it mentality, and his marketing is very kind of cheeky, and he's quite cheeky, and he's been hugely successful. So just getting back to this Steven Pressfield, it may actually help to think of it this way. If you're meant to cure cancer or write a symphony or crack Cold Fusion and you don't do it, you not only hurt yourself, even destroy yourself, you hurt your children, you hurt me, and you hurt the planet. So Steven Pressfield's being pretty, he's being dramatic as here, but I think that's what's at stake. Like, I take the calling and even the privilege of what I'm doing right now and being able to speak to you through this podcast, heart to heart. Like, I want to stir your waters of stagnancy and say, hey, wake up, this is urgent. You have work to do here on the earth, and purposeful work, and that God's actually assigned something to you, some work, and there's resistance in the way. And so to identify what that resistance is, and then be like, let's go. The resistance can come along, but, we're not listening to your resistance. We're going with the vision and what God's already spoken, what that vision is in your heart. And if you're not a Christian, maybe you haven't heard God, maybe you haven't partnered with God in a vision like I have. But, maybe you've got God in you, like he made you. So maybe you've journaled, maybe there's a dream, there's something quiet that you've got. And so identifying those things. Yeah, anyway, so I'll just read the rest of this show. Steven Pressfield, you shame the angels who watch over you, and you spite the Almighty who created you and only you with your unique gifts, for the sole purpose of nudging the human race 1 millimeter further along its path back to God. Creative work is not a selfish act or a bid for attention on the part of the actor. It's actually a gift to the world and every being in it. So don't cheat us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. And so I'm giving you what I've got, which is to come and stir your resistance waters and be like, do you see that resistance there? What's resistance preventing you from stepping into or doing? And and get you unhooked from it, basically. So resistance loves to, dress up as disbelief and false humility. Oh, it wouldn't be possible for me to do that. I'm just from Coffs Harbour, and I'm, only a butcher's wife or whatever. I'm not from Coffs Harbour. I'm not a butcher's wife. But, these little phrases of, downplaying and, not believing, the disbelief to our own calling is a big resistance. So please get this book, The War of Art, Steven Pressfield. I mean, it is so good. We fear discovering that we are more than we think we are, more than our parents, children, teachers think we are. We fear that we actually possess the talent that our still small voice tells us, that we actually have the guts, the perseverance, and the capacity. Do you know that you've got the capacity to do a lot more than you're already doing? And I'm so interested in really high achievers, because quite often some of that high achieving, especially people in under brands or in companies who are in, C-suite kind of leadership, or just in these kind of quite senior, successful type roles. Maybe they've made a lot of money in real estate, or, they've really risen, they've been like cream that's risen to the top. And I think those people are interesting, because if you took off safety wheels of the company, the brand, the logo, that they kind of sit under, I think the sky would be the limit. It would pale in comparison to what they would achieve outside of that. So I remember I had a friend one day, and they very humbly told me that they were afraid of their own power. And I don't know if you've ever been afraid of your... Actually, I've had two people tell me this, who were both very, very successful people. I remember this actually happened to me once fact, I was at Youth with a Mission in 2003 in Melbourne, and I actually was in a church meeting, and I felt the power of God come on me, and I never felt it to this degree. And it's like I had a glimpse as to how God wanted to flow through me in the future, and it actually really scared me. It felt too big, too huge. I didn't feel like it was something that I could even hold or contain. It was like a taste of the future. And so this idea that Steven Pressfield's talking about, that we would fear to discover that we're more than we think we are. And I mean, it's sad, isn't it, when our community or our family, pigeonhole us or, see us in one way. And so it can be quite hard to kind of break outside of that if people, are putting their own limits on you when you're actually unlimited. So Steven Pressfield says that we actually have the guts, the perseverance, the capacity, and we fear that we truly can steer our ship, plant our flag, reach our promised land. And we fear this because if it's true, then we become estranged from all we know, and we pass through a membrane. We become monsters and monstrous. So yeah, that's the other kind of out the other side. That could probably be a whole nother talk really to you once, you realize how, that you can do the things that you want to do and build and create. And so I really just wanted to invite you to check out my new offering, which will be in the show notes, and you can have a look on my social media. And I'd love to invite you into my mentorship program, where I will be working closely with, through an application process, who I think that I'll really be able to get alongside and help you propel into your future and into, far beyond the resistance that you're currently experiencing. So thank you so much for tuning in today to the Spark Joy podcast. And I think I could probably talk about this topic, for hours really. So it's been great to have you here on the show today. I want you to remember that most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. And between the two stands resistance. So please go forward. Don't let resistance stop you. And I hope this has brought the awareness to you today. Have a great week. So I'm going to be talking a lot more about work, because I see work as actually a spiritual undertaking. It's something that we do because God has, He's given us hands, He's given us feet to actually bring forth something in the world that is purposeful and also hugely fulfilling to ourselves. And just that work is actually spiritual. And when we tie it together with our calling and we begin to step into, that our work is unto God and that He's actually given us something very unique to do, then it's incredibly powerful. And it's also very dynamic in terms of the results and, who wants to be in on, the work that you're doing.